Welcome to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. I am your host, Molly Southgate, and today I'm interviewing
PD Alleva.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Molly?
I'm doing pretty good. So, can you tell me about your books?
Yes, I could definitely do that. I have 5 books published at the moment. So, ranging anywhere from my first book was a psychological thriller called Indifference. My second book, little information about myself, backstory. I'm a semi-retired hypnotist and behavioral therapist. All right. So my second book was a nonfiction book, philosophical and self-help, called Let Your Soul Evolve. Third book is a metaphysical family saga called A Billion Tiny Moments in Time. Fourth book would be it's a dark fiction collection of 3 short stories, and it kicked off what I consider my dark fiction / horror series, which is called Beyond the Chambered Door. And that first book is Twisted Tales of Deceit, which is 2 short stories and 1 novelette. And the novelette is called Knickerbocker, and it's a reimagining of the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Perfect for Halloween, Headless Horseman. And then the 5th book is a dark fantasy, and that is Presenting the Marriage of Kellyanne and Jerry Denimer. And then my 6th book that we have coming out right now comes out on the 7th, Wednesday, which I think is when this will be airing. And that is The Rose, Volume 1, dystopian science fiction thriller about underground alien vampires conspiring with elite humans to turn the human population into zombies.
Okay, well, all of those books sounds absolutely fabulous. I just want to start off by saying everyone should go read all of your books because they all sound so good. Can you touch back a little bit, though, on writing that novelette reimagining? Tell me a little bit about how you worked through and its connection with the source material.
Sure. So I grew up in Westchester County, even lived in Sleepy Hollow for a period of time. So I've been to Washington Irving's house just about every year, I think, in elementary school and middle school, going to see Washington Irving's house and hanging out in Sleepy Hollow. So the story always sat well with me. I always had this cosmic connection of, Washington Irving and myself, and we're both living in Westchester County, and just absolutely love the story, love the novel. And I'm kind of disappointed with a few of the reimaginings out there. The television show, the movie, when it first came out, did not like it all, although now I've grown to love it, the Johnny Depp one. So I was actually watching it like an hour before we got on to record this interview. And so it's The Headless Horseman. I love the way Washington Irving puts the novel towards the end of, is the Headless Horseman actually real, or is he just made up and they're trying to scare Ichabod Crane out of Sleepy Hollow? So when I was doing the reimagining, which I wrote probably about 20 years ago, it was a little short story, kind of more like a fan fiction type of thing. So I wanted to redo that short story and make it take place in today's society. So the reimagining takes place, so it's in today's society, but all the characters are recovering drug addicts that are all teachers employed at the prestigious Sleepy Hollow private school. And it gets a little bit wild from there. So Headless Horseman definitely comes in at Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, and that's where the ending takes place, and it's definitely a wild ride.
Oh, that sounds awesome. So, according to your website, you kind of coined the name of a genre, alternative fiction. Can you tell me about that?
Well, I don't. The word multi-genre, I don't like saying it. It sounds like you got marbles between your cheeks. So I'm like, all right, so my novels do have multiple genres in it, obviously dystopian science fiction, action, adventure, thriller. So I'm like, how can I say that it's multi-genre without saying it's multi-genre? And then I'm a child of the 90s. I'm a grunge kid, alternative music. So I said alternative fiction sounds really cool, and that's what you could get in a PD novel. You're going to cross those genres. So I thought it sounded a lot better than multi-genre. What do you think?
I love that so much because I think I've heard that phrase before, probably from you or somewhere, the alternative fiction, and I love that so much more. I also love alternative music.
Yeah.
And I think it really describes it well, especially when you're dealing with something more like psychological or a little darker, when it goes across all those different areas.
That's right. And then the content is a little alternative. I mean, alien vampires. You don't really see alien vampires anywhere. A couple of references out there, but for the most part, you don't. So why not mix it up? Coin a new genre, see what we could do with it.
Oh, yeah, totally. So can you share any tips about, like, a lot of your books are pretty dark. Can you share some things for authors about, like, not getting too lost and, like, getting too wrapped up in that darkness when you're writing heavy materials?
Yes, that I can. So a big thing that I'm big into meditation. I've been meditating for probably about the last 13 years. So I do a lot, at least 20 minutes to an hour meditation every day. And that definitely helps with the balance, because you're really getting into really the dark mind, the dark cauldron of human beings when you're writing dark fiction and horror stories. So you got to keep yourself balanced in a way. And that definitely helps. And then there's time with the family. Obviously, that's going to help as well. And then I take very long walks, and I do enjoy listening to some really good music, kind of like changes up the mindset that you're in. So when you're writing that dark fiction, it takes you to a different place. Mm-hmm. And you got to get it right, so you got to keep going. You got to keep delving in. How far down that rabbit hole do you want to go into? I go pretty far.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
When you're writing darker fiction, do you kind of get, like, wrapped up in it while you're writing, and sometimes you're like, what did I write? I have that happen to me when I go back and I'm like, what is this? This is terrifying. Where did this come from?
Yeah, what part of me did that come from?
Yeah.
I like to convince myself that it came from some otherworldly beings or something like that. They just planted it in my head, but it does come from us. And it's good, though. I mean, we do what we got to do. That's, we're horror writers. We love dark fiction. That's where we go. Let the imagination run wild is what I say. I'm writing a horror thriller right now called Jiggly Spot and the Zero Intellect. And it's cosmic horror, and it's also pays homage to the old, like, grindhouse movies of the 60s and 70s. And it's like cutting off your skull and just letting your brain and all the demons in there just continue to come out and come out and come out. And there's no limits to the imagination on that one. So let it go. That's I call it my quarantine book, right? Because I've been writing it since quarantine happened. It's been about 6 months, and we're at about 128,000 words. So it's a hefty one.
Ooh, so that far in 6 months, that's really good.
I know. He's those characters, I'll tell you, man, these characters have taken on a complete life of their own, different than all my other books. I mean, the characters always take on a life of their own. But this Jiggly Spot and the Zero Intellect, they have driven me absolutely batty for the last 6 months. They keep changing things and doing things and making me go and do rewrites if I don't do something right. It's like they actually are existing, and they're in complete control where this novel goes.
That is something that, having hosted this show for about like a year now, that happens all the time with writers. They always say that it's like this, like the characters just do whatever they want. And so do you find that sometimes they do kind of drive you crazy and you're like, I liked that plot line, but you're trying to tell me that I wouldn't do this?
Yes, I do. Yeah, they do that a lot. Especially, I have this one character. She's an alien, right? Her name is Kara, and I was having her go in one direction, and she kept saying, no, I don't like this. I don't, I would have to go back and do a rewrite. And then it's like, then I could go on to the rest of the novel once I get that right. And she's been doing that since the beginning. So me and her have this like love-hate relationship going on.
I love that. I love when you have a relationship with your characters. And, like, they drive you crazy, but you still, in the end, do love them because they're your characters.
That's right.
So, do you find that you put parts of yourself into the things that you create, like in your characters?
I think so. There's always a little bit of, I think, the writer in every character that goes out there. It's where, that's where it comes from. We're the foundation for them. So, yeah, I would definitely say that I come out in all of my characters, some way, form, or fashion.
Yeah, I think that's a thing, like, for people that are creatively gifted, too. At least I've always experienced that you kind of, like, put bits of yourself into whatever you're creating, and then it can make you like it more sometimes, too.
Yes, definitely. And even, like, I put some family members in there, too, although I won't tell them who they are. But I think they could figure it out on their own when they read the novel. Oh. But they're in there, too. My little brother is definitely in Jiggly Spot, which I find quite humorous. So, and
that's awesome. I was just about to ask you if you have any Easter eggs in your books.
I definitely do. I definitely put a lot of Easter eggs in there too. Also, what I love to do is I've been so influenced. I'm 45 years old over the course of my life, and I like putting little tidbits in my novels towards like a movie that inspired, this particular novel or another book. Even if it's just like a little line, it's in there. You could probably play spot the reference, if you wanted to on any novel to say, hey, I know where he got this one from. So, and I think that makes it more intriguing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So what goes into the process of making something to like terrify your readers?
What goes into the process? All right. So like everything else, it starts with an idea about what's the fear? Like, what do I fear the most? And that's what I want to delve into. That's what I want to go down that rabbit hole. What scares me the most and find out what are the depths of despair that come from the wretchedness from that fear if it had been manifested.
Okay. Oh, okay. That's really cool.
All right.
Yeah.
So keep going with it. All right. So if God forbid that this thing happened or this fear happened and it's actually real, what are the depths? How far down the rabbit hole does it go? How long is that dark tunnel before you come out and see the light? And then the biggest question always is, do you actually find the light at the end of the tunnel?
I like this. That's really interesting. I'm actually working on something right now, and I'm like ooh, how do I put in all this horror writing stuff? And I hope all the listeners right now are thinking about this and gonna put this knowledge in there.
Right. Fact. That's a definite fact.
Yeah. So do you tend to write, like when you're writing psychological things or something, do you write and think, oh, what scares me and what would scare most people? Or do you think, oh, what is like a specific thing that I have?
I think it's the more general way. So this would scare me, and I'm sure this would scare other people too. So let's put this in, and like another horror thriller, Jiggly Spot I'm writing, another horror thriller that I'm doing content edits for, probably next year release. That's called Golem. And Golem is based on Jewish folklore and mythology. So a golem is a demonic force that gets incarnated into like a statue, an inanimate object. So that's golem. But obviously I did more to it than that, take the take of Golem, and then I put it into 1940s and 1950s New York. And all right, so you got this demonic force. What else can I put in there that will make people scared? And sometimes it's not exactly the content of the story, but the little blips and stuff that happen within this story. Like this person gets killed, or this fear comes in because they're going to be taking over the entire world, whatever, something like that. That would scare the bejesus out of people if this type of person takes over the entire world. So it's not. I don't think it's always 100% the story, less the actual things that happen within the story, those little scenes that scare the hell out of people.
Oh, okay, cool. So, are your reading tastes similar to your writing style?
Yes, that they are. Right now I'm reading James Patterson and J.D. Barker. Coast to Coast Murders just came out. And I can't wait for V.E. Schwab, which comes out, I think, tomorrow. Her new one, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I think I got that right. It's a long title. So I love V.E. Schwab. Vicious, vengeful, big Blake Crouch fan as well, especially Dark Matter and Recursion. And those are your science fiction, but thrillers, fast paced. And then obviously I love Stephen King. But he gets too many kudos. So we'll go on to another author by the name of, right? I mean, he does. He's Stephen King. So he's the king for a reason. But, it's true. John Connolly. John Connolly is an exceptional author. His prose is poetic, and he's written a lot of novels, but he has a series called the Charlie Parker series, which is supernatural thrillers, and awesome. Absolutely great series. I think he has like 15 books already.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, he's phenomenal writer. So yeah, it definitely, as far as this is what I'm writing and this is what I'm reading, yeah, it's definitely reflective.
Yeah, all those books that you just listed, I want to go and read all of them now. Those all sound so good. I get too many recommendations on this show. There's too many good books out there.
Gotcha. Definitely go with Blake Crouch. You'll be blown away. Recursion blew me away. It's like, after I read that book, I'm like, all right, he just like upped the game as far as writing. Like, it was that good. I was highly impressed.
Oh, wow. All right. Yeah, I definitely will read that. Kind of off of that, how you were saying he like upped the game in his writing. Right. Have you read any books that made you personally feel like you became a better writer just by reading a fiction book?
By reading like someone else's fiction book? Yeah, that particular book definitely did that for me. After I read it, I was like, all right, I'm inspired to do better, for always working on your craft and honing your craft as a writer. And we want to get better consistently, that's the goal. So there's always something else to learn. And that book particularly, because I finished reading it probably right before the pandemic. I'm like, this is great. This makes me want to do better. And the next book I'm writing or whatever I'm editing right now. So yeah, definitely that book I would say did it.
Cool.
Yeah.
So have you always liked writing?
Yes. Yeah, I've been doing it since I was a kid. I remember I wrote my first short story when I was in second grade, written fan fiction when I was a kid, and I wrote my first full-length novel when I was 12 years old, sixth grade. And that was a sci-fi fantasy based on a dream that I had, and then obviously influenced by The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings at that time, and Dungeons and Dragons. So all my life I've been writing.
Oh, wow. Do you think that any of the old works that you did, like when you were a kid, you'll go back and like edit and publish eventually? Or like take those ideas? I
would have to find them. So when I was a kid, I had a pen and I had a 5-subject notebook. And where those 5-subject notebooks are at this moment, I do not know, unfortunately.
Oh, that's so sad. Yeah. Have you ever looked back on your old writing and been like, oh my gosh, this is so cringy?
Yes, that I have.
I know that a lot of times when I ask that question, pretty much every time people say that there's been a lot. Do you have any specific examples?
Let's say when I was about to write this new book, The Rose, that's coming out, when I was sitting down to write that, I came up with the idea from about 3 different novels that I had been writing over probably about a decade long. And then going back into them, because I had put them to the side, didn't finish them. And I understood why I didn't finish them. Because when I started writing this novel, I said, let me go back to these and just kind of like go through it, gloss over it, grab some ideas and stuff like that. And I'm like, all right, so it's good that you put these to the side because they are definitely not too good there. Mm-hmm. You got to up your game. But that's what we do, right?
Oh, yeah. So, do you outline your books?
I don't. I do not. So I get the thought in my head, I get the idea in my head, and I have this uncanny knack. So once I like send something to myself via an email, and that's usually the way it goes when I get an idea, it's via email. It like imprints on the brain. So I don't actually have to go back and look at these things anymore, look at the emails, because it's just in there. It's in the brain. So when I go and write, it kind of just flows out from there.
So you're, like, as what the writing community would say, like, you're a pantser. You just like to let it happen. Do you feel like that's a more natural process?
For me, yes, it is. Never been into outlines. Probably has something to do with my 10th grade teacher, who I didn't like, telling me about outlines.
Oh,
So what are you going to do, right?
yeah.
So definitely not an outliner. I got it in my head. I know where it's going. I'll send myself some emails. And like this series, the Rose series, it's going to be 7 books, right? So, but I have all those books in my head. Where are they going? What are the stakes are going to be up? How does it escalate? What's going on with each individual character? What's the story and what's the overall focus? I have that in my head. I do have it written down in probably a gazillion emails, but when I sit down to write, let's go.
I was just about to ask you, like, how do you keep that entire 7-book arc, like, in your head for all those individual things? So you send yourself the emails. That's an interesting tactic. I've never heard that before.
It's a good one. It works quite well because you could, wherever you are, you have this phone, right? Mm-hmm. It's attached to our hips. I call it the umbilical cord, right? So wherever we are, we have this phone. And I can send an email to myself at any time, and I have a nice little folder, right, that says whatever, Gollum or Jiggly Spot or the Rose, whatever it is, and I just put the email into that folder.
Yeah. So for your book, The Rose, how did you decide on having it be about alien vampires?
Okay, so alien vampires. There is an old show called Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. Okay. And this show, all right, so I was probably like 4 years old, I think, 4 or 5 years old when this show was out. And one of the episodes has an alien vampire in it. And it's like the old Nosferatu looking alien vampire or vampire. And I was so scared at that age watching this show, the way this alien vampire looked. He has stuck with me my entire life. So when I started putting this novel together and aliens and stuff like that, I'm like, well, that's great. I could use this character that's been in my head for the last like 40 years and actually create an entire species out of it. Now, my alien vampires are nothing at all like the alien vampire that's in Buck Rogers. And what's funny is a couple of years ago when I was probably about halfway done writing the book, I said, you know what? I need to find that episode and see what all the fuss is about. Because I guarantee you, considering technology and the way it's come over the last 40 years since that episode was put out, I can guarantee you it looks completely fake, and I'm not going to be scared. There's going to be nothing wrong with it. It's going to probably look so ridiculous, and I was 100% spot on. Took me a while to find the episode, but I did find it, and I just blew my mind. I'm like, you were scared over this, but you're 4 years old, 5 years old. Yeah, I'm sure you're going to be scared, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, when I think about the things that scared me at that age, it's right. Like the most ridiculous things. And I wasn't even like a scaredy cat kid. Like
Yeah. Neither was I. But that one definitely got me. I remember actually standing behind a chair and watching the episode from behind the chair. That's how scared I was.
Oh. So when you went back and rewatched it, were there any things that the character said or anything like that or like a certain descriptor that you kind of threw in the book to pay homage to that?
A little bit. So what he does is he's like an energy vampire. All right. So he sucks people's life forces. He doesn't actually bite them. He sucks their life force out of them. And I didn't use that particularly with the alien vampires that I have, but I took that energy like sucking type of thing and kind of turned it into a reverse of that, which is the superpower, which is called the Rose. Their superpower is the Rose, which is based on alchemy meditation. All right. So alchemy and this Rose meditation that they have is for protection from people like energy vampires. All right. So you protect yourself, you put like an orb around your ethereal plane, and nothing can come into that plane that you don't choose to allow. All right. So it keeps all the vibrations and the energy outside of your little bubble there. Now, naturally, I upped it because it's science fiction. So when the protagonist or antagonist uses the rose meditation, anything within their sphere, they can manipulate the chemical structures. So they could turn somebody into dust if they wanted. They could also move objects with their mind, as long as it's within their sphere, all right, within their orb that surrounds them. But here's the thing, a true master who takes on the rose could actually expand their orb as well. So they could be sitting in whatever, say Texas, and they could expand their entire their orb of protection to be the size of the entire Earth and change the Earth if they wanted to.
Oh, wow. As you're saying this, I'm just like in awe. I totally have to read this book.
Thank you.
So how did you decide on using things like the rose in it? Like choosing those things to pair with the vampires?
Okay, so because I'm a psychologist, or semi-retired psychologist and hypnotist, I've had some training, I guess you could say, in meditation, mindfulness, and in alchemy as well. Like that's my inner circle of people. Those are the things that they're into. So with the rose, that meditation actually came to me by somebody who does alchemy and believes in alchemy, and they had sent me that meditation practice. And as I said before, the meditation practice is for protection from outside energy vampires. So kind of like quirks like that. Now, I also love the show Ancient Aliens. All right, so I've had this love of aliens and alien lore since I was a little kid as well, probably about 12, 13 years old. So Ancient Aliens is a show that I definitely got into, and I enjoy it, and I love the conspiracies. I love the lore and the theories they have. So I wanted to put that into the book too, and that is definitely in there. So if anybody out there is an Ancient Aliens fan, you will love this book. Particularly, you could play and find out what theories and what concepts from Ancient Aliens are in the book.
Awesome. Yeah, can you actually talk a little bit about putting in your favorite media into books and like taking lore from that and like incorporating it in and changing it up a bit?
Yes, definitely. So ancient alien theorists are very particular. We're a big fan, so I had to make sure that I had it right. So you'll see things with the Robert Morningstar papers. All right, I'm sure they'll know what Robert Morningstar papers are. So Robert Morningstar is an American Indian who, according to his ancestors, an alien came down, actually crash landed, and told them the entire history of the human race. And he had written this in a paper. So I see a huge interest, and just taking like little bits of that and incorporating it into the mythology behind the alien vampires and the reason why they live in Hollow Earth, Sub-Middle Earth. It's where they reside. So why are they there? And then I have gray aliens in there as well. Some are telepathic and completely evil, and others are nice and kind. So what's the lore behind that, according to, say, Robert Morningstar, the Akashic Record? And then I also have the 12th planet theory is in there. It's kind of like towards the end, and it hints towards it, and there'll be more with that as well.
That is so cool. Can you talk about that a little bit more and about like how other writers can add in their things and like their theories and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you're watching Ancient Aliens or you're watching any sort of conspiracy and you're into it, you're definitely going to probably come up with your own take on it, you know? Where do those questions come from? What do you think? Why aren't they here? Why are they here? Why haven't aliens showed up and said, hey, we're here, we're here to take over your planet, or we're here to show you a way to peace, who knows? But we all have our own theories. So putting that kind of like take into our own novels, I think is probably going to be coming out a little bit more and more as time goes on, because that show has been so successful over the last few years, probably the last decade. So I think we're going to see a lot of books that kind of incorporate those theories. And then the whole ancient alien theory too, going back to how human beings were created. What's the story of creation? Were aliens here when we were first born, just coming out? What's the theory behind that? And these books, the 7 series, is going to kind of delve into each one of those theories a little bit at a time.
I love that so much. I personally don't know a lot about like conspiracy theories and like beliefs about aliens and stuff like that, but I always think it's so interesting whenever I hear about that sort of thing.
Nice.
So you have so many incredible, like, creative ideas. How do you stay inspired?
All right. So how do I stay inspired? I do go for nice long walks. That definitely helps. Meditation definitely helps, but mostly, all right. So I will watch an old movie, like best case in point, because I'm writing the novel now, Jiggly Spot and the Zero Intellect. At a certain point, I was like, I need to refresh. I need a little bit more inspiration. And I watched 2001: A Space Odyssey. And that gets the juices flowing again, because it's not necessarily the movie itself, but it's the experience of when I first watched the movie. That's nostalgia, the want and desire to create high art, like 2001: A Space Odyssey is. So I'll watch movies like that. I'll even put on, like, when I start writing The Rose Volume 2, more than likely what I'm going to be watching is Empire Strikes Back, The Godfather Part 2, and The Dark Knight. Those will be my three movies that I'll probably keep on loop, because they're all, one, incredibly great sequels, right? And two, they're inspiring to me because they come from when I was a kid. They're all nostalgia, and I just absolutely love them. So that's inspirational right there.
So you mentioned having, like, the movies on loops, like while you're writing, or like after you're writing. Do you also listen to music?
Yes, I do. 100%.
What types do you listen to that help you get into the zone?
Sure. All right. So I am a classic rock type of guy. Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Doors. Keep going. Then I'm a grunge kid, so I love my Pearl Jam. I love my Nirvana. I love Stone Temple Pilots, Soundgarden, Rage Against the Machine, bands like that. That gets the blood pumping. Also, all right. So when I'm editing, I'll put on more like jazz, Janis Joplin. Sometimes I'll put on like classical music, Beethoven or Mozart or Bach or something like that. And that helps really with the editing process, because it gets my head into a different space. Now, when I was writing action scenes in The Rose, there were two songs that I used to get me into the mood for the battle, and then to get the battle going in my head. And that was Pink Floyd, Shine On You Crazy Diamond. So I would start with that and get the flow. I start seeing the action building in my head, like the beginning, the coming of the storm is coming. I'm seeing these aliens, and I'm seeing this battle about to take place. And then I would transfer over and I would put on Led Zeppelin's Kashmir. All right. And that is such a hard-hitting, hard-bumping song. I could see the characters battling it out as they're to that song. So it definitely helped. And I love it. And actually, one of the beginning quotes in the book is from Led Zeppelin's Kashmir.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, I had to put that in there. Sit with elders of the gentle race this world has seldom seen. They talk of days for which they sit and wait. All will be revealed. Which reminds me of a character in the story called Robin Winter, who is that elder. He's the leader of the rebel freedom fighters, and he's very mysterious as well.
That is so cool. So you can't see me right now, but while you were saying that whole thing about all the music, I was very enthusiastically nodding and smiling, because I listened to all those bands, and my family and I all listened to those, and it's so incredible. And so how do you go about selecting exactly which song? Like you said, you had a few that you listened to for the battle sequence. How do you choose exactly what you want to use there?
I don't think I'm actually choosing it. What'll happen is when I'm writing, when I'm in the midst of writing and I'm about to come up with something, I always have music playing, right? So all of a sudden a song will come on and it'll connect to the scene that I'm writing, or a very specific character. It has that emotion, like with presenting the marriage of Kellyanne and Jerry Dennemer. Jerry Dennemer is a very sullen character, right? And he's going through what's like a bit of heartbreak. So I had Chris Cornell did a version of Nothing Compares to You. It's an acoustic version. And he belts this song out. You could feel the pain, in his voice coming out. And that allowed me to get into Jerry's pain as well. So it was just boom, it's like I'm hearing this song and I'm relating it to this character. So I don't think I'm actually choosing it. I think it's kind of coming to me.
Oh, yes, I definitely understand that. Or
Cool.
I've had this happen before, too, when you're listening to a song and all of a sudden that you've heard 1,000 times, and all of a sudden you really listen to it, and you're like, oh, this is clearly about these characters or about this situation in my life. Have you had that happen?
Yes, that I have that same exact incident with the Chris Cornell song and the Jerry Denner. It's like, this is absolutely perfect. And then there's even what does he say in the song? Where did I go wrong? Right? He like screams that out, belts it out. Sinead O'Connor did too. And I actually put that line in the book as well. Jerry says that. So it really came out, and the emotion comes out in that book too.
That is awesome. Yeah, I really love how songwriting and like writing prose kind of can mingle together. And I think it's so interesting. Sometimes I do struggle with listening to music when I write because I find myself writing it down.
Gotcha.
Have you ever had that happen? Like if you hear a conversation in another room and you start writing the conversation?
I haven't had that done as far as the conversation, but I have written some lyrics and I'm like, wait a minute, what am I doing? I need to put this down or take the headphones off, and I need to actually get out of that realm and get back into what I call the third dimension. So it definitely does happen.
Yes. So I know this is a slightly weird cycle back, but earlier you mentioned that when you were a kid you wrote fanfic. What did you write? Like what was that? What fandoms were those for?
The Goonies. Goonies was one. Back to the Future. I don't know if you ever watched Rambo, but First Blood was pretty big when I was a kid. So Rambo was in there too. And then Ghostbusters.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely on the Ghostbusters. It was quite enjoyable.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love fanfic, and I also write it.
Yeah.
So when I was hearing that, I was like, yay! Oh, someone else on here likes it too. That's
right. Fan fiction is a lot of fun. So keep it going. That's what I say. Yeah, it's fun to write and it's fun to read. You know?
Yes, everyone stop stigmatizing fan fiction and go love it and just have fun with it.
Exactly.
So, my final question for you today is, what do you have coming up?
Okay, so we have The Rose, that's October 7th, and The Rose Volume 2, when I'll be doing that 7 books, right? But it's going to be 3 different series. So it's The Rose Volume 1 and Volume 2, and then it picks up in a different series called The Indigo Trials, which is going to be a trilogy, obviously. Mm-hmm. And that takes place about 10 to 15 years after The Rose Volume 2. And then after that is going to be Robin Winter, all right, or pretty much just Winter. But it's going to be 2 books that center around him and him traveling through time to try to prevent World War III from happening.
Oh, all of these sound so cool.
Great time travel. I love time travel. So that definitely gearing up to write that one over a period of time. And then I got Jiggly Spot and the Zero Intellect, but that's being written. So that's not going to be ready for probably not even next year, the year after. And then we have Gollum, the horror thriller that's coming out. And that'll be probably, I'm thinking, anywhere between May to June next year.
Awesome. Yeah, everyone go read all of his books. They all sound absolutely fabulous. I cannot wait to read them. Well, thank you so much for being on today. I really love talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
For Read Between the Lines, my name is Molly Southgate.
And I'm PD Alleva.
Let's end this the way all great stories end. Happily ever after. The
end.
Thank you for listening to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. This episode is hosted by Molly Southgate. It is edited by Rob Southgate and produced by Southgate Media Group. You can get in touch with the show at readbetweenthelines@gmail.com, or you can send us a voicemail at 708-887-9473. That was 708-887-9473. You can also find us on Instagram at Read Between the Lines Podcast. Thank you so much for listening.